Hello, Darren. That was Darren Brittain together. Hi,
Hello.
Darren.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Lovely. Thank you for joining me tonight. This is absolutely a privilege. Um, Darren is just a marvelous medium that Suzette Lloyd top mentioned to me about. Um, I think you were doing a group thing with her a few years ago. That's when you came to my attention,
Mm.
but you're just, internationally well known. So I'm just going to read out Darren's biography just to give you an idea about Brian. Probably some watching will know him anyway, but anyway, at 17, Darren stepped into a spiritualist church for the very first time, fully expecting it would also be his last. For 4 years, he had been seeing mysterious lights shimmering around people, a phenomenon that seemed to appear during bouts of severe headaches. His visit that evening was driven by a simple hope to find an explanation. He joined the open circle and quietly observed. Around him, people were sharing messages, snippets about granddad's rhubarb, and other details that to his sceptical mind seemed more than a little eccentric. Certainly there would be no answers here. He felt the impulse to slip away. Just then a woman approached. Without hesitation, she began speaking about his psychic sensitivities, describing the very lights that he had been seeing for years and naming them as the aura. She told him the spirit world had plans for him, and most surprisingly of all, predicted that within a year he would be standing on a platform doing precisely what she was doing that night. Since 1992, Darren has demonstrated his mediumship in spiritualist churches, public halls, and theatres, travelling extensively throughout the UK and internationally to Portugal, Spain, Gibraltar, Norway, Finland, Holland, Switzerland, Germany, Canada, and the United States. His work has been featured in respected esoteric publications such as Two Worlds and Psychic News, and in recent years he has declined several offers to appear on high-profile television programs, concerned that such appearances would reduce the true purpose of his work for entertainment. That's admirable. Recognized for his clarity and precision of his communication with the spirit world, Darren is known for delivering names, dates, street names, and personal details so accurate that many leave with an unshakable sense that his life continues beyond the physical. Yet for Darren, mediumship is more than a message giving. Through his teachings, he is passionate about helping others to explore, understand, and refine their own mediumistic potential, guiding students to trust their connection, deepen their awareness, and work with authenticity and integrity. He also seeks to remind people through both his experiences and his link with spirit that we are divine in origin, and that by attuning to this eternal source of love, we can find healing, purpose, and a more profound sense of who we truly are. So I read that earlier and I thought, oh, that's a really good way to start this evening. Um, just to explain a bit about you, which sounds amazing anyway. And I will just say quickly that Darren is going to be with us on the 24th of July in Romsey at the golf course, which is a beautiful venue, for the evening. And then he's going to be with us for the whole weekend. So we're going to find out a bit more about what we can hope to gain from a weekend with you. But yeah, by all means, take it away, Darren, just to say a bit about what you would like to share with us for this evening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And it's interesting when you kind of read back the biography, because I wrote that a long time ago. And then when you kind of read it back, it really, as you were reading it, I was reminded of of what a journey it's felt like it's been from that moment of not believing, thinking it was all nonsense, was not going to stay in the spiritualist church. And it wasn't anything wrong with the church itself or the people in it, other than, you know, even as a youngster, as a 17-year-old boy, I was looking for some degree of evidence of the claim. You know, if you're telling me you speak to the dead people, then I want to see evidence, and I want to hear evidence of that. And I suppose that's kind of been my kind of mantra really throughout the journey. So going from a place of not really believing, not really having any evidence to support the belief or any belief, to where we are now is kind of quite a journey. And it's taken about 35 years to get to this point. And lots of changes and challenges for all of us in this spiritual journey. But yeah, so when you read that out, it does give me a real sense of moving from one state to another, completely a polar opposite state, which is interesting because I think, but what made that happen was evidence along the way, evidence of ability, of evidence of awareness, evidence of the spirit world throughout, from my own experience, but also from other people giving communication to me. So yeah, it was the evidence that I think really kind of made that shift from one state to another.
Did you ever question, was it you, or were you actually being told this?
Yeah.
Like, question your own mind?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't question my mind now in the same way that I did back then. I ask different questions now as a seasoned medium. I suppose in the early days, there's something quite profound in the early days of unfoldment. There's a real sense of awe and wonder about every part of it, every new thing that I experience, a new picture, a new sound, a new feeling, a new smell. Gosh, I mean, a new venue to go to. All of those are really significant markers of growth and evolution and whatnot. So there was, in the early days, everything was, I was in awe of everything, but also in the same point questioned everything. Because, for those of you that do this work, when you're in the mediumistic state, it's real. There's no question. There's no question that that world exists. There's no question that awareness functions. But of course, when you're not in the mediumistic state and you're engaging in that reflective process, and you're in your normal mind, in your probably normal is the wrong word, but in your mind when you're not in that experience, I think the mind can't comprehend the reality of the spirit world because it's not in it. It's engaged with physical senses and what it can see and hear on this level. So I think that questioning of, is it real, is it not? Is it me, is it not? I think is absolutely appropriate to the mind of the medium. The challenge is learning not to engage in that type of thinking whilst you're in the mediumistic state, because it kicks you out of the mediumistic state, as we all know. So absolutely, that point of, is it real? Is it not real? Absolutely. And I think it should be a part of all of our unfoldment. We should certainly be discerning and not just blindly accept everything as truth. I think the mind can create so many experiences that are not about the spirit world. So discernment's a really important part of unfoldment. So yeah, in the early days, there was a lot of questioning. Yeah.
And the lady that come up to you that night, was she then your tutor?
No, so her name was Phyllis Hibbard, and she was a lovely, sweet old lady. When I first went to the Spiritualist Church when I was 17, it was kind of like a Hammer House horror movie, in as much as I turned up, it was the 18th of December, it was a dark night, it was foggy, there was nobody around. It was one of those kind of, you see it on a film, you think this is not going to end well. This is not good. And so I was kind of walking to the door and I saw this shadow, this silhouette approach me. And it was a Phyllis. I knew her name now, obviously. But and when I got there and I said, look, I'm really nervous. Do you mind if I come in with you? And she was like, yeah, that's fine, love. She was really friendly and just grabbed me by the arm and pulled me in. And I sat near the door because just in case this was full of crazy people, and as a kid, I'd heard all sorts of stories about what went on in the spooky hut, and it ranged from dancing around naked around a fire to all manner of offerings and sacrifices. So I sat near the door in case I was going to be an offering or a sacrifice, just in case I could get out quick. And that was really how it began. So Phyllis was always at Open Circle. And she seemed to be, she was incredibly approachable. She actually was Roman Catholic, and she spent a lot of her kind of religious life in Catholicism, but she had this ability, she had this awareness, and she had an outlet in the Spiritualist Church to express it. So she would come along, and she just was I suppose in a way a teacher, but in a really passive way. I think we're very blessed now that we have educators that are very proactive and instructive and guiding you and mentoring you, and that wasn't her brand, that wasn't who she was, but she taught by example. So she was a very much a passive teacher, and and then there was a point that I was sitting in circle, and the spirit world would say, focus here, look at that person. What do you see? What do you feel? So there was a point when I started to move, not consciously, but started to withdraw from the teaching from Phyllis and from Sheila and from Anne and the people that were in circle with me, and started instead to be guided by from a different place. So that's really where my training really came from. I sat in a couple of various circles, and some of them unhelpful, I felt, and some of them really helpful. But I think they were useful because they helped me understand who I am and what do I believe in response to what I'm told. So there was value in it. But ultimately, Phyllis was always there. She was always really supportive and very comforting, and she created a kind of a sense of safety in that environment, which sounds quite bizarre, considering that I went into it thinking I was going to be sacrificed to God knows what. But there was a sense of safety that she conveyed, which was really beautiful. And I think that because of that sense of safety, I was able to let my defenses down a little more. And that probably helped my unfoldment, you know.
I mean,
Um,
you must have been guided there, because at that young age to go there on your own, were your parents interested in that side?
No, they I think also thought I was going to be part of a cult or was going to be sacrificed to goodness knows what. So they were really beautifully parental and like, are you sure? What are you doing here? What's going on here? Let me come with you. What is going on? So they were very parental and doing the right thing by taking care of me in that respect. But they didn't share that belief, and they didn't share my experience, and they couldn't understand what my pull was to be in that environment or to be in that atmosphere. So I think from their perspective, they were doing all the right safeguarding things, that good parents should do, but they couldn't enter into my world, in that respect, because they weren't able to see what I was seeing. They weren't able to feel what I was feeling. They could assess the people that I was sat around to assess that they weren't, harmful people to me. But in terms of helping me navigate the inner experience, they weren't able to meet me on that level. No fault of theirs, but it was a very
Absolutely,
different
yeah.
journey.
But you still went with it. So, I mean, you were absolutely guided. So, did
Yeah,
you then, because we apparently all have a specific guide, like we have a team, do we?
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't
but do you
know.
have a specific guide that you name?
I don't specifically, and that
Oh,
isn't to say that I deny their existence or presence. I think that we
no.
are guided. I think that as spiritual beings that we are, we're always influenced, and sometimes those spiritual guides are not external spiritual beings. Sometimes they're people in physical form, that act as part of our guidance system. So I don't personalize, and this I think also is quite interesting because I think that if a spiritual being is a highly evolved spiritual being, if a spiritual guide is a highly evolved spiritual being, what's the need for a name, a face, and an identity?
Yeah.
What's that about? So I've never really overtly personalized spirit guides. I'm not in denial of their presence. I'm not in denial of their influence, but I've never felt the need to understand a name for it to have value or to be valid. And that isn't also to invalidate anybody else that does, because I also wonder whether spiritual guides aren't external, that they are aspects of the soul's memory as well. So when we see the face of the nun or the Native American Indian, is that the soul that we are ultimately has lived those worlds and lived in those cultures, and that we somehow tap into the memory of that. So I don't know. I always answer that question with I don't know, because I don't think anybody can know. I think we give meaning to an experience, and then that
Mhm.
has value and it becomes real to us. But in terms of whether we have a team or whether we have 7 levels of spiritual progression, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful, because the amount of compliments that you see or testimonials that I've seen of yours after you've done an event, that you can say that it is down to you, really. I was thinking perhaps, I know Brian Walker is a psychic surgeon, um, and he always says he calls his team in, or
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
So yeah, I
mm.
was going on that, really, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
I think what's interesting about that, though, as well, Jackie, is that everybody's experience of the spirit world is unique to them. And this is what's difficult about trying to, in a way, teach mediumship, because, the students aren't one size fits all. The teachers aren't one size fits all. We, as teachers or mediums, have not had every experience there ever is. And so I think that we can sometimes lean into the benefit of somebody else's experience, but that's still their experience. That may not be your reality. And if we start to over identify with somebody else's experience, then you make it your reality. And then it starts to be molded to conform, which we see a lot of, sadly, but because we lose the individuality then. So I think that, not to invalidate anybody's experience, but if it's real for you, it's true for you, you know.
mm.
So that's the kind of attitude I hold with these things, really.
Oh, I love that. So, what was it like for your first time on platform?
Oh my God, if I could have vomited, honestly, in all seriousness, I'd love to make it spiritual, but it was rough. It was rough because I'm filled with anxiety. I'm 17, almost 18 years old. Um,
Wow.
I'd gone to the Spiritualist church, which was it's been renovated since the days when I went there, but it was a tiny little hut with like moldy ceiling dropping on people. You'd sit in the church sometimes and like a piece of ceiling would land on your shoulder. But it was the most beautiful environment in terms of atmosphere and connection and belonging and support and that sense of safety that you felt there, although the roof was sometimes questionable. But going in there, I sat in the audience with my friend Frida, who's to my date, is one of my oldest friends in this world, really. And I just had a feeling we were there to watch another medium, and I didn't have a clue who they were. And I sat there and I just had this really profound feeling of I really could work today. And it's the first time I ever acknowledged that because I was a reluctant medium, and I still am to some degree a reluctant medium. It's not when I'm in it, I love it. When I'm out of it, I'm okay. I'm okay being out of it as well. So, but when I was sat there, I had a really strong feeling. I really want to work, and I thought, well, that I just missed it because, well, why would I? It's not my service. I'm just here to watch somebody else. And then my friend Frida, who was sat beside me, just wandered away, and I thought, oh, she's gone to the bathroom. Turns out she knew the mediums that were on and asked whether I could stand on platform with them. She hadn't spoken to me about that. So I knew that when she came back, she then offered me this opportunity to go and stand with the mediums. And honestly, it was the most terrified I think I've probably ever been in life, Thankfully, there was a kind of a rostrum that, it's got like a barrier. And I swear that I was gripping the chair so tightly, my knuckles were white. I was anxious, hot, sick, nauseous. I asked to sit on the end in case I needed to leave the platform because I was so filled with fear. Um, and then, you kind of get into that place and there's something miraculous happens where I think that, I realize now what that is. That miraculous happens is that the nervous system changes and it starts to respond very differently. And the state of consciousness we move in becomes very different because of that. But at the time, I just remember being in that power. And the only thing I remember from that event was talking to a lady at the back of the church about her mum and how she'd given her mum's she'd been handling her mum's pearls, I think it was that day. And that's the only thing I remember from the whole event. So I was petrified, but when I got off the platform, there was this overwhelming sense of that just felt right. It just felt that I was in the right place. And it was within a year of Phyllis having given me that communication. So it was
Oh,
quite
truth
profound.
chills.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was a magical experience.
Oh, that is incredible. I would think for anyone to get on the platform, but at such a young age as well. That was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a photograph of it somewhere actually, which is interesting. And when you look back at old pictures and you think, why did somebody not tell me about my hair, my clothes, all those things? But I didn't expect it. I literally was there to watch somebody else. And
Oh, that's
and I
amazing.
think for many people, for many mediums, that's kind of how it happens. The speaker doesn't turn up one day and you're on.
Yes.
I think there's something about the reluctance of it that somehow makes it more sweet in some respects.
Well, I went to Bittern Spiritual Church one night to see a medium that I'd heard such a lot about. And I was really looking forward to it. And he didn't turn up, coming from Swindon, and there was a lot of traffic, whatever. So a chap there that I'd heard or seen before, but not really seen on platform, stepped in. And I was disappointed, definitely disappointed that the one hadn't turned up, because I'd heard such a lot about him. Anyway, the one that got on, he brought through my mum, and of all the millions of songs that you could ever choose to, he said, "I've got drink to drink to drink to Lily the Pink."
Oh my gosh.
And that was the only song I ever remember my mum saying she liked. It was
Wonderful.
just incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you don't expect, or or you have a thought around something and then it turns out completely different, yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, fabulous. And of course, it's the evidence. Like the song is really evidential for you, and that's all as mediums we've got to sell. I can't make you see the spirit world, but I can only give you evidence of my experience, and hopefully that becomes enough. But of course, the evidence, unless it's specific and personal and relational, it doesn't help us to move into that place of believing or realizing the reality of it. It's got to be specific and personal. Otherwise, what are we doing? You
Well,
know?
exactly. And the other thing, we will get on to what your evening will be about and your weekend with us, which I'm delighted that you're spending the weekend with us. It's a marvelous thing. Um, oh, what was I going to say though? It's went out of my mind. I'll have to come back to that, Darren.
That's
Oh,
okay.
bother, sorry.
That's okay.
Talking about bittern and that chap coming along. I'll come back to that. Yeah, so shall we talk about
Let's
your
do it.
evening with us and your weekend?
Yeah, yeah.
What
So I
we
love demonstrating. Demonstrating and teaching are my two favorite things, literally. And I think it's because they've been the constant throughout my journey, really. And so demonstrating mediumship, wherever it is, I'm more than happy to demonstrate. I think there's something about demonstrating mediumship that really is almost a gateway for many people into this movement. Once they've seen a medium or they've experienced a communication or like yourself had a really impactful message, I think that becomes almost the gateway drug in a way to exploration. And so mediumship in that respect is always the signpost, I think, to the soul, to the greater truth of who we are. So demonstrations are filled with usually emotion, filled with anticipation, filled with nervousness and that's just me. The audience have got their own set of stuff going on. But from that perspective, I love it because it really does facilitate reunion. That's really what I think mediumship does. It facilitates reunion. And that is always a beautiful thing. So demonstrating mediumship is one of my absolute loves. And teaching, yeah, because I think once people have been signposted into this world, into this arena, into this reality, then what? I think that's the thing. Then what? And I remember the very early days of my involvement really fondly, in terms of, the first time somebody says yes to you as a medium, the first time somebody comes and says thank you, that you've changed things for them. That is such a beautiful, magical place. So to be able to facilitate a space where students get to experience that is a really beautiful thing. So I'm always really happy to take mediumship demonstrations and teaching, because it's often the beginning. It's often the beginning. It's never the place we should stay. It's a great place to start.
I love that. I do actually remember what I was going to say now. When you're giving messages, I've been to, I help quite a lot at a spiritual church near here, and I've been to a lot of services. And once you've got the connection and you know who you're connected with, do you continue to give evidence, or do you then direction, or is it just led from spirit?
Yeah, I'm very much of the mind that the spirit world come pre-packed. They know what they want to give, they know what they want to say, and they know how long they want to do that for. So I think there's an intelligence in communication, and I think as mediums, this is the sad thing I find with mediumship unfoldment in this generation, is that there's a pursuit to give the type of evidence you want to give. You're encouraged in mediumship unfoldment to get their name, how did they die, what's their job. And my argument is always that information might feel relevant to you as the medium. It might give you a sense of certainty to get responses to that. But does that meet the need of the spirit communicator? And is that information knowable to the recipient? That's the other thing. People are chasing information, which actually we believe makes it feel like it's good evidence. But what if the recipient doesn't know that information?
Yes.
So we're wasting so much time in trying to achieve a type of mediumship that we think is valuable, but it may not be at all valuable to the process. And so from my perspective, I don't ask the spirit world questions. I don't ask them to give me certain bits of evidence. I just move into the power and allow them to do their thing. And my job is just to relay that. And whether that is 7 minutes or 2 minutes or one sentence, there's intelligence in that. So I tend not to steer it. Now, I think in public demonstrations, you're giving communication to one recipient, but you're kind of demonstrating to the rest of the room. You're demonstrating the reality of the spirit world to everybody else. So there has to be some quality to that demonstration, that even if you're not receiving personal communication, there's still an evidential quality that you can witness and also experience the presence of the spirit world. So that's why I like demonstrations, because it isn't just, how many people can I do a reading for? Because I think if we're held by the spirit world, then those in our presence as mediums become held by the power as well. So everybody gets an experience in some way. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on demonstrating.
I mean, yeah, because I hold a lot of psychic suppers. Well, a lot. I do 2 a year.
Yeah.
But it seems a
A lot
lot
of
when
work
it comes
still.
round.
Yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah. I love doing them. But it's like the expectation that comes with
Mm.
the people, because, I usually know that the
Okay.
mediums I ask to come along, um, from my own experience of having a reading with them or being at a evening at the church and knowing the sort of evidence they give.
Mm.
But then because it's been so good, and if you can only be as good as your last service, as Joan says, the girl I work that runs the church. And yeah, so then you get people disappointed, and then you think, why do I run these things? Because
Yeah.
they've come along with an expectation, but spirit, you can only give what spirit give.
Yeah, but I think also what we do is we perpetuate that expectation by selling a psychic supper and saying everyone's guaranteed a message. I think that's one of the challenges, that sometimes we create this expectation rather than just allowing the spirit world to do what their work is, and let that meet the need of wherever that is and whoever that's for. But I think we live in a generation now where people, when they pay their money, they have understandably an expectation. And the more money they pay, they have a higher expectation. If you buy, a book for £1 and it doesn't meet your need, oh well, it's just £1. But if you pay £200 for that book, there's a higher expectation of it. So I think we have to look at, within spiritualism, within mediumship, what are we selling here? Because part of what we do is perpetuate that expectation, which really creates, or can create, a lot of tension within the medium. And the medium then has to live up to that expectation. So I sometimes think it isn't always kind to us. Now, people are always going to have expectations, that we can't eliminate that completely. And one of the ways that I find to navigate that expectation is to detach from the outcome, is
Yeah.
not become attached to the communication, not want or need to please or prove or meet that expectation. That's not my job. My job is just to give you my experience, and if that lands, beautiful. If it doesn't, oh well. Because if I start to really over identify with the outcome, are people happy? Are they getting what they want? Do they people like me? Then I'm far too involved in the mediumistic experience. So I have to work really hard to leave the experience, let it be, and just let the spirit world give what they want to give. Now, that's challenging. And I remember as a young medium being completely at the mercy of the audience or the sitter. If they said no, I'd work really hard to prove that I was right. So it wasn't about proving the spirit world for me as a young man. It was about proving Darren as a 17-year-old boy. So I was so involved in the experience of, I must give, I must prove, I must meet, I must make everybody happy. And I became very aligned with looking for signs of, am I doing that? Did they
Yeah.
cry? Did they cry? Did they rebook? How many bookings have I got this year? I would look to measure how successful I was in meeting expectation. And quite honestly, it was torturous. Really, it was torturous, because I created within me this tension, this desire, this need to prove. And of course, if sitters said no, I was absolutely slumped. If sitters said yes, I was great, so I think expectation is a really difficult one, and it's understandable at the same time that if you have lost a loved one that is so, so in your heart, and you're so desperately seeking communication and comfort from that person, of course you're going to have expectation. Of course you are, and you should have. And you should also have the ability to discern what is evidence and what isn't evidence. That's really important. My best friend passed away last year, and I would desperately love to hear from him, from a medium, and and I'm sure it will happen when it happens. But for me, it has to be evidential. There has to be an evidential quality to that communication, and I guess that's really what motivates me in mediumship now, is to be an evidential medium, not just to give platitudes and not just to say nice things. There has to be an evidential quality to it. So that's my expectation of myself. I'm expecting to deliver information that is evidential, but beyond pleasing the sitter or making them happy, I can't get involved with that because I'm then too involved.
I love that. That's really kind to self and others to
Mm,
say that, to be honest. It really is. Um, I always read out the guidelines at the start to make sure everyone's aware that the reader can only give what they're given, and not to come with expectation, and are
yeah,
you in sound mind, that you can handle
yeah,
whatever comes.
yeah,
And so yeah, we just go through the guideline. But
yeah,
yes, you're absolutely right. That's really lovely that you can, for your own peace of mind, work like that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Um, so yeah, for the weekend, if anyone's interested in coming along to our weekend, which will be the 25th and 26th of July in Minstead, a beautiful little village hall, surrounded by fields. Quite
Oh,
often we see the deer out in the fields, horses.
yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. It really is a lovely venue, an area for something like we're going to be doing. Well,
Mm.
you.
Well, you're there too.
Yeah, I'm
But,
there,
but
but
but those kind of grassroots community-based venues are so beautiful.
yes,
They really are. And I think there are people that will often go into a venue like that rather than going to a big swanky hotel where there's a big seminar being done. And, I think that there's a level of intimacy in that kind of environment, which I think lends itself beautifully to this work. So I'm really excited to, and I've seen pictures of it and it does look stunning. So I'm
it
really,
does.
really
Oh, good.
excited to be there.
Yes, good.
Mm.
So what can we hope, like, what's your ideal for the people coming along? Is it in the hope that, if they've got an interest in getting on the platform, it might be that boost to get there?
Oh, I mean that decision, I guess, is between the student and the spirit world, I guess,
Mhm.
really. My job is to help to facilitate a space, to create a space which is supportive of the experience, supportive of the unfoldment. So I'm not a critical teacher, I'm not punitive, I'm not looking to assess or judge or critique your work. I just want us all to create a space where the spirit world can meet us where we're at, and to just move into a space. And there will be throughout the weekend, exercises that we'll do to help to sharpen sensitivity, to teach us what the signs of connection are to the spirit world. How do we know that we're connected to the spirit world? Even that's a really big thing. That's a starting point. It's really important that we know what connection to the spirit world feels like. So that will be a thread that will run through the weekend as well. We'll certainly talk and teach about the nature of evidence, what is evidential mediumship, and really what should that contain. I'm mindful of the word should because that implies pressure and demand and expectation, but I think it's really important that we are clear on what evidence of life after death is and what it isn't. And part of that is because mediumship is not just a set of skills, it's also a reflection of the medium. So we can teach you how to talk to the spirit world on one level. That's one part of that's a skill set. But mediumship is molded by the medium to a degree as well. So part of the work will always be about looking at what's going on within you, what's happening within you in response to the power, in response to the spirit world. So there'll be some work looking at you as the vessel, as the medium, because mediumship is a reflexive process. It's partly to do with a set of skills, but it's also partly to do with you. what do you believe? You know, there's a beautiful quote. I use it a lot in teaching, and you'll probably hear me bang on about this all weekend as well. And I apologize now if that's the case, but it's from a beautiful book by a man called Howard Falco called I Am. And he says that the ego's desire is always to turn the belief about itself into the experience of itself. And so we have to look in mediumship unfoldment. What do you believe? What do you believe the spirit world is? Where do you believe the spirit world is? What do you believe happens when we die? All of these things serve to create a molding of the experience. And so in the beginning, when I thought this was all nonsense, it was kind of harder for the spirit world, I think, to get through in their most accurate, clear way, because I was layering it with all sorts of expectations, beliefs, wants, believing what my tutor told me was true, even though that didn't maybe resonate with me. So I think that the reflective process of mediumship is something I'm really passionate about. So there will be aspects of self-development throughout the weekend, as well as mediumship unfoldment, and being able to identify differences between mediumship and psychic connections and intuitive work. So yeah, there'll be lots of opportunities to practice and to try.
Wonderful. Where does philosophy of spirituality come into your work, or does it, you
Well,
know?
I think it does. I'm very conscious that we tend to shy away from philosophy. I think many of the times I think people think that, you know, I'm not articulate enough, clever enough, have learnt enough, I've done enough. You know, we find ourselves reasons why we can't be philosophical or inspirational in our work. And I don't want to limit it only to a spiritualist faith, but we are a spiritual being, and we have had eons of experience as a spiritual being that is filled with wisdom. So I think philosophy and the desire to express philosophy is inherent with all of us. And I think the minute we start to put our feet on this pathway, we start to live from a different place. It's not just a belief system, we live differently. And part of that living differently is looking at things from a different perspective, maybe from a slightly more philosophical perspective or a slightly more reflective perspective. That rhymes. But that's actually a beautiful thing, because I think we start to then move beyond the ego and beyond all those identifications and thoughts of what it thinks it should be. So I think philosophy is a great way to broaden our unfoldment, really. And I think, as I said, most of us, you know, sometimes struggle to embrace philosophy because we start to, you know, give meaning to it, and we start to think that I'm not enough. I'm not clever enough, not wordy enough, haven't lived enough, haven't done enough for our voice to feel valid. So yeah, so I think there is an absolute value from it. And I think when we start to move out of the ego and we start to identify with the soul that we are, the soul in its desire to express is full of inspiration, is full of philosophy. And I think that can be incredibly powerful as a listener to receive. So yeah, yeah, I think it's an overlooked aspect of spiritual work that I think is it's a shame.
There's occasion, you know, you'll get a medium come along and say that they're very open to being asked questions, you
Mm,
know, so where you would normally give an address, a reading, an address, and
yeah,
then go into the mediumship,
yeah,
they will say about having questions. And I mean, I'm in heaven then when you can
yeah,
ask questions about spirituality to
yeah,
understand, you know, different reasons, um, yeah,
yeah.
surrounding children and things like that. So yes, I think there is a need to know, I think a bit of an understanding as well, because spirituality, not to say about any other religion, but it's not a religion. We are spiritual beings, so it is spiritualism.
Mm, mm.
Um, so yeah, I think just to understand a bit more about that, because I think we're very open and welcoming to everybody, anybody of any religion or whatever,
Yeah.
to come in and ask questions.
Yeah, and equality harms nobody, does it? I think that's the
No,
thing we've got to remember is that, you know, although, you know, we look different, we act different, we behave differently, we show different in the world, we have different thoughts and beliefs and ideas, and that's absolutely wonderful. You know, that they're aspects of the identity that we have, but the soul that we are is equal to everybody. You know, there's no separation on that level, at least. So yeah, so certainly, you know, if we can embrace the equality harms no one on this level, then I think great change happens. But I think if we can take that attitude to the spirit world, that makes us much more accepting of mediums, as mediums rather. It makes us less, you know, demanding of only certain type of people or certain type of evidence or certain type of communicators. So part of the work by doing self-reflection work really sometimes opens up those biases, to show us that for us to be the best medium we can be, we have to lose ourselves. We have to lose our bias. We have to lose our expectation. We've got to lose our demand and instead meet the spirit world from a place of acceptance. And that's very difficult to meet them with acceptance if we hold a sense of certainty. So what you're describing with questions and curiosity is beautiful, because curiosity and certainty can't live in the same place so well together. So, one is much more limiting and one's much more expansive. So having curiosity as students is beautiful. I always welcome that. Even if that curiosity might feel challenging, I think that's still beautiful because it allows the individual to grow, which is always what unfoldment should be, an individual experience.
I mean, in spirituality, our belief is, we will never die. Our energy is always, and that's what we're bringing through anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of questions that can be asked around that. Honestly, Darren, I've loved speaking to you.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about our evening or our weekend together, but honestly, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Thank you. Well, I guess what I would say is we need an audience.
Oh,
We
yes.
we can be beautiful and we can be, have all these wonderful conversations, but we need to have people to experience this, to be able to sit in the presence of the spirit world and judge for themselves or assess for themselves the reality of the experience. And ultimately, I think that's people can tell us, can't we, that there is death or there isn't, there is survival after death or there isn't. People have their opinions and that will run and run and run forever, as it should do. But I think that, I am more than happy for people to hold an opinion that the spirit world doesn't exist, as long as they've had an experience of mediumship, because ultimately, experience is our greatest teacher. So I think that, if you come along to a demonstration of mediumship and you've absolutely felt moved by that process on that experience, and it's at least made you question the reality of something else, then I think that's its job is done. So for us to be able to do that, then we need audience, we need students, we need people who are willing to have that experience, and hopefully by having that experience they can make a much more informed decision about, is it real, is it right, and is it for me? And that's the best we can ever hope for, really.
Wonderful. Honestly, I've loved speaking to you. Thank you so much, Darren.
Thank you, my lovely. Thank you for inviting me and all the work you do to spread the word. It's really meaningful.
Oh, love you. Thank you so much. Thank you, anyone that's watching tonight. Any questions, pop them in and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Bye.